Alright, so again, here's some code I just realized I forgot to actually show off. So for starters, we have the skybox. I added a pointer for to get the skybox model so that we can use it for the graphic objects. And other than that, it's just a bunch of inverted flat planes set up as such. For the terrain model, it is slightly different than what we had before. So for starters, I had to get the model pointer, but also because I had a area where you could see underneath the plane of the terrain, I doubled the amount of verts and triangles, so that way I could redo the terrain, but flip the windings of the triangles so that they face the opposite direction. So this was done over here with doubling the number of verts. And whenever I run this, I now do the normal vert and then the flipped vert on the other part of the function. So now each vert will have its own vert and then a vert at the same position facing the opposite direction. And after that, we have the plane for the same thing as before. We have this offset of the for doubling, and it will invert the winding so that it's inside out. And then the last thing I need to show is the pre-made models over here from the pre-made demo. Here's the box. Here is the repeated texture box. I added a lang thing for this because for my final scene with the ice block, I wanted a bigger cube without messing with scale because that messes with lighting. So I just added a function to change it, kind of like how the sphere has the H slice and V slice parameters. And most of this is fairly standard stuff, setting up all the vertices and then the winding associated with it. And then for the sphere, because we did repeated texture, I just did it based off of v and U, which I set up with my for loop. And then, yeah, I think that is everything now. I don't know if I have to really show the shaders themselves, but I'll just quickly go over these. So these are all the shaders. They handle the input layout as well as the buffers for each shader. So each shader has a fog buffer, but not all of them use it because I couldn't get it properly working. So all of them have the proper setting things up that you need. So for shader texture, we have the fog parameters as well as the text coords being associated with the given input, the given texture sampler. Here's where you set the texture sampler, the camera, and the world. Just trying to find out where I put that. The light one is the same thing, but also it has to handle with light. So now there's a normal, and it also has light buffers to deal with. Our world buffer now deals with the material, and as well as the texture. And the way that I handled this is I had an array for the point and spotlights, so that you would specify the number for the point and spotlight, and that will, when it's time to send the light parameters, you'll go through every single point and spotlight sent, and then send all of those through the buffer. Finally, we have sending the world and material, and then rendering the scene. Then we have here color light. This one doesn't, because it's only color. We don't have a text core to work with here. Then we have the buffers, followed by the camera, fog data, directional point spot. This one for my demo also began to handle multi-light. For my other scenes, I don't think I had it handle multi-light in my final scene itself, but in other scenes I did. So this just sets it up so that it can be handled multi-light. If you didn't want multi-light, you can remove the arrays. So instead, the point and spotlights would not handle an array. It would only handle one. And that's how I set this one up. Shader color, only position matters for this. We don't have any text coords or normals for this one. So we have our camera matrices, world color, and rendering it. And then the last thing to discuss would be how the shaders themselves are handled. So I'll do color light, color selected, texture. Yeah. So these were the four textures used, things used for our code. So for texture, when it comes down to actually running it, we would have to set the texture sampler to it. For the texture trio, because there's multi-light handled for this, we have to update the constant buffer for light parameters to handle how many lights. I know it says trio, but for my demo, for my final scene, I ended up using 4. And then we set all of these to rendering properly. Color selected. And then when it's time to actually set up the code, we have a for loop to loop through every single point and spotlight so that each one is accounted for. And then we apply fog when we're done with that. The second to last was color selected, which just handles the input color. And then finally for the color light, this one is for the pre-made model. So this one has 3 different point lights to handle each duplicate scene. So we have 3 and 3. And then when it comes time to it, we end up looping through everything and then applying fog. The difference between color light and light texture is that light texture has to apply the texture sampler. And I believe that is everything.